Electricast. Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Welcome to Her Extraordinary Life by Design, where we celebrate women who are shaping their lives one extraordinary day at a time. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet, self-care coach for women who are ready to make self-care a priority to support them in life and business. Every week, I'll be speaking with inspiring women from various walks of life who will share their personal journeys and will discover how they have fearlessly carved their own paths as business owners, passionately pursuing their dreams and creating a meaningful impact on their communities. So let's get started. Hello, and welcome to Her Extraordinary Life by Design podcast. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet, and today we're talking with Joyce Layman. Joyce is your go-to visibility strategist for online-focused business owners, whether newcomers to the digital world or going through a reinvention. Over 14 years of building her business from the ground up, Joyce loves experiencing opportunities the online world holds for those willing to take imperfect action. Her superpower is showing you how to amplify your online presence, leverage strategic connections, and attract your ideal clients so you can add hundreds of emails to your list and generate more leads without relying on launches, ads, or getting burned out on social media. I love that, Joyce. I'm very excited to speak with you today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Leslie. I am thrilled to be here.
Thank you. So traditionally, I ask my guests to share a little bit about them before we get to the core of what they do. But for today, I just want to dive right in. So we're in season 3 in this first month of January, and the focus is on personal development and growth, which primary focus is to empower women to start the year off in the right mindset to hit the ground running. And you are starting things off for us. So with that being said, I want to talk about what you do. I know that you have an extensive background in performance mindset, which is really the foundation for everything that you do now. So can you tell us how you got started in this area and how it became the foundation for the strategies you use to help clients amplify their online presence?
Yes, and I will try to keep this as succinct as possible. I've been in business a minute. I started my business back in 2008, but it was in 2005. Many find it hard to believe that I am a former wallflower in the world of business networking, and public speaking was my second biggest fear. And I was in outside sales, so networking was a big part of what I needed to do. I went to an event, and the woman, Denise Mills, who literally changed my life, the course of my career, she had this energy that lit up the room. And I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I want that. And I introduced myself and I said, where can I get more of this? She goes, well, I'm speaking tomorrow at the Olathe Chamber. I went 2 days in a row to hear the same woman talk on networking. We met for coffee afterwards. And something that I was saying, she goes, there's this program you need to go through. I didn't know what it was. I said, sign me up. And it happened to be a 4-day program from the Pacific Institute based in Seattle. They have over 50 years experience working with leaders, working with elite strike forces, professional athlete, teams. And it's all based in performance mindset. They work with some of the top cognitive psychology researchers in the world and developed this curriculum. The founder was a former high school teacher and football coach, and his team couldn't win anything. And it was tapping into the subconscious. So how does your mind work consciously, subconsciously, habits, attitudes, beliefs, and expectations? 2 days in, I went to my facilitator and I said, I have to teach this stuff. 2 days into a 4-day program. I went through the program, became trained as a facilitator. I left an outside sales role. Technically, I just changed because I was still doing sales for Denise and Alan, who were affiliates here. And then I was facilitating these programs. And I love Denise, still speak to her to this day. And I worked for their company for a couple of years, but I didn't like how they were marketing their business. So in 2008, I decided to launch my own business because a recession is the best time. It's time to launch a business. But I was doing training, I was doing keynotes, I would work with leaders, I would facilitate leadership retreats, mastermind retreats. And it was through that process that I made all the business building, the marketing mistakes. I call it my $23,000 mistake in my second book, but spending money with somebody to do a logo and branding, 13 grand on my first website in 2008. But that included a 2-camera video shoot because if I was going to launch as a keynote speaker, I needed to have video, like all of these things. So through the years, then my content, what I was teaching on, shifted a little bit. So it started to include how you build a personal brand, strategic networking. Everything I did was a result of going through the Pacific Institute. It was called Investment in Excellence. They've changed the name of the program, but everything went back to mindset. I spoke at TEDx on the topic of comfort zones. My first book was called Just Another Leap, and it was based off my TEDx talk. My second book was Your Connecting Advantage. It's how to build a brand and how to strategically network, but it went back to mindset. I had to understand what my comfort zones were. I had to know how to be able to push them. And you may be like this. I'm sure some of your listeners are like this as well. But I also found out my Colby A assessment. I'm one of those. I take the Tina Fey philosophy of say yes and you'll figure it out. So I would agree to things and not have everything I needed to do it, but then I knew I'd figure it out. I also knew how my brain worked. I became known as a walking LinkedIn because I know how to use my reticular activating system to spot opportunities in the least likely places. And it was literally that mindset that became the foundation of everything. How I got over my fear of speaking in public. I went on to do keynotes. I went on to speak on national stages. I love facilitating programs to 500 to 1,000 people. I mean, to me, that's now fun. And I used to physically shake. But throughout all of that, it wasn't just me. I have clients that know this because this is part of, this is part of what you teach as well. The greatest obstacle we'll ever face is the 4 inches between our ears. If I'm asking somebody to do a podcast guest spot, in fact, I had a conversation with a client today where we use bundles, strategic collaborations, and bundles is one of them. She's afraid to put herself out there. Interesting thing, she's a licensed therapist. She wrote a book called Cut the Shit. And I said, Beck, I love you. Cut the shit, put yourself out there and get 200 more people on your email list because guess what happened with your first bundle? So it's one of those things, our mindset every single day, it shapes how we show up in the world, what we're able to accomplish, what we're not able to accomplish. So it's still, even though visibility is more of what I do, mindset is a huge, huge piece for me personally, but also it's still included in my programs as well.
Yeah. And it's what I love too is that sometimes we can doubt ourselves. And so that's why I always feel it's really great to have connections, like the right connections in your circle to remind you, you've done this before, like, don't you remember you've done this before already? But sometimes we get in the, I mean, I've even caught myself being in it and not being able to see my way through and just having my connection to be able to say, hey, remember when you've done this before? It's just that, our mind sometimes can play tricks on us. And especially when you're in the thick of it. And just sometimes it's almost like, I look at it like if you've ever been in a conversation with someone and you just, someone that you know who they are, you run into them, but somehow you've forgotten their name. And I kind of look at it like that. It's like, just sometimes we forget. And it's because we're in the moment and it's almost like our brain is like going so fast that it skips over a few details. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, I really love that mindset is part of what you do, because for me, mindset, it begins everything. It shapes everything, like how we think, feel, all of that. And a lot of that, I believe, comes from our experiences. And so that's why I always say, go digging back in your past, because you're going to find gold there. And don't be afraid to see all of the things that you're not really happy about, because those are just parts of your journey. They don't define who you are. But I know a lot of people look at that and think, oh, this is definitive of who I am. And they're afraid to look at their past. So they'd rather, push it down and push it away. And rather than facing it and saying, I can use this actually to fuel me today. So I love that. So I know you have certain life moments that have helped you build resilience. Can you share a pivotal experience and how it has impacted both your personal and professional growth?
Yes. I have experienced an incredible amount of loss in my life. I am 60. My parents were born in 1925. My oldest brother is 74 years old. And then I had two other siblings as well. I always have to preface that. I know we're audio only, but people will look at me and go, you're not 60. It's like, thank you very much. Good genes. And I've worked really hard at it. But it's also put me in the midst of life experiences. And I know that some of your listeners, like I lost my parents at 81 and 83 when I was in my 40s. I went through having a mother, and actually my dad passed first, then having my mother in a nursing home for a year and being the on-call person while I was juggling being an entrepreneur. I was single, so there wasn't anybody else to take up the slack. I had to juggle my business as well as take care of my mom and be there. My brothers were amazing. One lived in Lawrence, one was close by, but he also worked for a company, so I had the most flexible schedule. So that was part of it. But losing my parents then, one of the hardest moments of my life was in 2012. I loved horses from a child. I got bit by the horse gene at a very young age. In my 20s, I bought a saddlebred mare. Her name was Admiral's Barefoot Baby. And because she was, anyway, there's a story. I won't go into it. But I had Baby for 22 years, showed her for 11 years. I was riding 3 to 4 days a week for 11 years. If anybody's had a horse, the bond, I have had pets my entire life. I love my cats, loved my dogs. A bond with a horse is something that's a little bit different. And the first thing that happened, Baby had been retired on a friend's property, and I lost her in a barn fire on Christmas night, 2012. And I woke up the next day physically shaking, and I could not stop. I couldn't stop. The interesting thing was at the time, I had been working with a woman, her name was Marty Hill, and her story was featured in CBS 48 Hours Live to Tell. When you have been featured in a national program like that, your experience has been pretty horrific. And Marty taught me an extraordinary lesson. You can go look her up. The short was she'd hired a handyman her mom had used a year before. He came and did work, and 2 weeks later, he came back with the sole intent to kill her. He did not succeed because she's here, but what she went through mentally, physically. And I remember having a conversation with Marty after the fire, and I'm like, but I didn't almost die. And she said, but your trauma is your trauma. And it brought home, how we all go through stuff. You just went through tropical storms. You have that uncertainty, and you have that, maybe it's something with your, when you're listening, could be your parents. It could be you personally dealing with a health issue. There are so many things that are happening in today's world, which seems to be crazy at times, in addition to build a business, right? Let's build a business and then have life. But that was one of those things. I went back to what I'd learned with the Pacific Institute. I also had to work with a counselor because I found out PTSD, my body, it was a traumatic moment. The problem was I had not solved the problem. I put a Band-Aid on it. March 2nd, 2020, my healthy 58-year-old brother, who loved and adored, we'd go to Chiefs games. He'd been taken to the hospital unresponsive, which was crazy because Craig was healthy, volunteered for everything in business development for Spire Energy, thought he had the flu for 2 weeks. I made it to the hospital in time to say goodbye. My brother died in front of me.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Joyce.
It's been 4 years. And then imagine we go into a pandemic. I am single. My oldest brother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer the year before. Very, very, very lucky they caught it early. So Steve is doing great. But imagine being alone. On top of that, running a business. So I've been doing keynote speaking and training all of the business development I'd done the 6 months before for speaking and training opportunities in 2020 vanished. Nobody was doing anything during a pandemic. I'm fortunate that I worked with a naturopath for many years because of hormones. My body literally shut down. My nervous system shut down because I put a Band-Aid on the barn fire. So I had to work with a therapist, went through EMDR, went back to what I knew from the Pacific Institute. And there were days I'd lay on the couch, but there were other days that I continued to work. So it's one of those things of having that background, knowing what my brain, knowing what my mind is doing, my conscious, my subconscious, knowing that when you're in the midst of grief, if you're having a shitty day and a breakdown, then go with it. I completely lost it this year in August because I lost both my parents in August. And there was one day I started bawling and Mark's looking at me. I'm like, I don't know, but this is just, grief's here. It is here. If you've gone through grief, it just happens. But yet we have to figure out, how do you manage that when you're trying to run a business and you got to get on a call, or it's like, how do you manage to do all of that? I'm just fortunate that I have tools. And I also have a strong support system of people being able, to support me. But I was alone. I was married in my 20s, but I was also alone for so many years that I learned to be pretty freaking resilient and also sometimes too tough with an outer shell to let people in. So I've had to learn that it's okay to let people support you in that process. So yeah, that's just, like I said, I've lost my parents, my national championship horse of 22 years. And then the biggest thing was losing Craig. And it just, grief hits you in different ways than just stress. I remember I was at the dentist and I'm like, we got to hurry up and get this done because I didn't know it was going to take that long. She's like, well, that's stressful. I'm like, no, this isn't stressful. Meetings aren't stressful to me. Grief is stressful. Meetings are just something you manage. So I always say, have a pity party, just don't stay long and don't invite anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And grief, there's so many different levels and everyone grieves in their own way. So I appreciate that you shared all of that with us today, because I know just thinking back and going through it. But again, those parts of your life, they're still really good memories, even though there's those ending points. You still have great memories around all, the people in your life that you lost your horse of 22 years and, losing your horse, but there's still those great memories. So it's like finding the gratitude even in the crappiest moments of life. So I love that. And I want to talk about what you've talked about to me. You shared something with me I would love for you to share with our listeners, which is that you have been preparing for what you call achieving level 60 in life. So what does this shift mean for you? And how are you approaching this next phase with both your business and your personal development in mind?
Instead of saying age or I had a birthday, I started calling it levels a couple of years ago, because to me, it makes it seem like no matter what age, and I realize age is a state of mind, although some mornings it's easier to get up and start moving around based on what I put my body through the day before. But level 60, it actually started a year ago at 59. Mark and I have been together 3.5 years. We know we're each other's forever. He just turned 68. And on our very first official date, we got to know each other through the car group for 9 months at track weekends during the pandemic. But our very first official date, he goes, so what's your 5-year plan? He's also been a very successful wealth advisor for 41 years. So it's one of those things that goals are super important. And this is one of the things he helps clients do. So at 59, I looked at my business model. I also said, what is the business that I want to create that I have a little bit more flexibility? So as Mark fully retires, he's a year away from that I have a little bit more flexibility, that I can literally work wherever. I'm fortunate as long as I have a laptop, kind of like you, right? I'm not doing the in-person stuff rarely at all. So as long as I have a laptop, I'm good. I still work with my private clients. I only have 3 private clients max. I used to do a lot more private client work, but I want to be able to show up. I have a 6-month group coaching program that people can stay on at an alumni rate after that. And then I launched 2 low-cost memberships, one's $7 a month and one's $27 a month. I did it for a couple of reasons. I called it my $23,000 mistake. I see too many people starting in business and they're spending a fortune with people who aren't guiding them in the right direction. So that's what the memberships are for. But how I deliver the content changes the amount of time I put in to it. So I have more flexibility within that. And then, of course, private clients have access to me via Slack, but they're also paying considerably more to have that private client access. But it's wanting to serve my audience, my clients in different ways. And especially, I've been burned by some high ticket coaches. I've had amazing experience with a couple of high ticket coaches and got burned by other ones. I'd rather pay somebody to help guide me than make too many mistakes on my own. But that's part of the reason for the change of the business model. But ultimately, it's how do I find some work-life balance? Like I said, I'm not looking to scale up. I'm looking to maintain for probably 3 to, could be 65, depending on how I deliver. I could very easily be doing this for another 5 years. I just don't want to have a massive team. So I do it very simply. And that was actually refreshing for me.
No, I'm happy to hear that. That's so great. And I love the idea of achieving level 60 in life. It's a great way to look at life. Like you're at this, you're now making changes, you're doing more, you're finding ways to do less, but achieve more or to give more without having to give the time and the energy. And I think that's where I feel like people need to learn to focus. How you use your time and your energy is really, that's the key to that fulfillment. It's, money does, money obviously is energy. Money is a form of being able to do certain things in life. But the ultimate, I think, is paying attention to how we use our time and our energy and understanding that that's the most valuable. And then when you master that is when all of the other pieces fall into place. So I just love your idea of the level 60 in life. So thanks for sharing that with me. So let's shift just a little bit. I know one of your superpowers is helping people amplify their online presence without relying on launches, ads, or burning out on social media. So what are some practical steps that you recommend for online business owners who want to grow their visibility without falling into that trap of overwhelm, irritability, frustration, loss of focus, maybe motivation, fully stressed out, all of the things which can ultimately lead to burnout?
Great question. And it starts with go Google yourself. It's a thing that I tell clients. I don't care what level you're at, go Google yourself, because the first thing you want to look at is what impression you're making with the world. There may be a website out there or a social platform that you haven't been using in a while that is really outdated. I still am on multiple speakers bureaus. I still have corporate clients reaching out to me through bureaus since that's where I was marketing. Those are things when you Google yourself, you're like, oh, I didn't realize I was there. I didn't realize that image was there, or that I was video doing a presentation that happens to be out on YouTube. So Google yourself, clean things up first. At least track and know where your assets are. What social platforms are you on? What platforms don't you need to be on? I used Twitter early on. That's how I met Bob Berg, the author of The Go-Giver and Endless Referrals. And Twitter was an amazing platform. I haven't used it for years, but yet I still had a profile. I'm like, I'm done because that's just not where my clients are spending time. So part of it is trying to be everywhere, doing all the things. You need an amazing online presence. Doesn't mean you have to spend a fortune. It means that the messaging has to be right. There's small things you can do to look like the expert that you are. And one of the lessons I learned, I had a beautiful website in 2008. The copy was crap. People weren't staying on my website. So it's not just pretty pictures. It's what does your content say? Are you speaking to your perfect fit client? Are you talking about their problems and making it about them? So that's the first place. The second thing is leveraging relationships. I used to teach strategic networking in person, building tribes that I literally referred millions in dollars in business and helped other people do the same. Keep in mind, we were working with bigger clients, right? Versus solopreneurs, but it still applies. And that was one of the things that I had not fully included when I made the shift with my memberships. So that's where simple things, even if you're brand new, maybe you're still building out your coaching program, you can do podcast interviews just like this that talk about your personal story. And then when you're spreading the word about the podcast, you're sharing the links. Leslie, you're going to share on your side. I'm going to share on my side. New audiences are going to see this that may not have before. One of the biggest things is through collaborative bundles and summits. I add 10 to 20 people a day to my email list who are downloading my offers. And that's been phenomenal. And then nurturing them. Summits are another great thing. Maybe you network in person. Fantastic. There are ways that you can collaborate and get your name out, even if you're introverted. I know. I know people got audience members who are listening to this going, I don't want to be on video or I don't want to go to a networking event. There are ways that you can do it. I'm going to challenge you and push you outside your comfort zone. But I don't spend a lot of time on social. I have an Instagram 9 grid. I have an average of 7,000 views a month on Pinterest, and I hadn't posted anything in over a year. I have a YouTube channel that grows every day, and I haven't uploaded a new video in probably a year. So I'm not about platforms like Instagram and Facebook where you have to keep up with the crazy algorithm. That's just not what I teach. You're going to go farther through relationships, so much farther through relationships. So hopefully that helps a little bit. But yeah, Google yourself, make sure your message is clear, and then figure out how you can borrow other people's audiences, but you can also give back. It's not just a take. You also want to be doing your part. It's Bob Berg. People do business with people they know, like, and trust. But how can you help the person that you're working with?
Yeah, I love that advice. And it's so true. Looking at what we're doing, it's the message has to align with, like, what are you really doing? And it can't be about you. I think another thing that you had said earlier was that someone that you knew was afraid to put herself out there. And I recently heard this, and it really connected more with me when it was said in a way that a lot of people feel like they're putting themselves out there. And it's really, no, it's not like you're not really putting yourself out there. You're putting your services out there. And that takes away the pressure. If you're putting your services out there, then it's like it's not about you. It's about what you have to offer. Right. So I love that. So I want to bring it back to you. Throughout your journey, you have emphasized the importance of taking imperfect action. How has embracing imperfection played a role in your personal development? And how can women use this mindset to grow their businesses and their confidence in 2025 and beyond?
I mentioned the quote, my Tina Fey, say yes and you'll figure it out. After I spoke at TEDx and I was invited to do that, I had one of my best friends, she's still one of my best friends in business. She helped update a page on my website that said, Just Another Leap is coming out, because my TEDx talk was Just Another Leap, but it's coming out in spring, 2014. I had a conference organizer call me in January and say, hey, we see your book's coming out. We'd love to have you. I'm like, fantastic. I get off the phone, call Jennifer. I'm like, crap, I haven't written a book. I agreed. Talk about imperfect action. I agreed to speak at a conference and deliver a book, and I didn't even write a book yet, which I scrambled and I got done. Same thing happened a year later. I knew I wanted to do a book on branding and strategic networking, and I had an organizer reach out in the spring and said, we need you in September. Like, great, I'll have it done. I wrote a 220-page business book that went from in my brain to on my doorstep in 35 days.
Wow.
No ChatGPT, by the way. But I'd gone through the process. I knew what it took. I found an amazing copy editor. I knew I could very easily talk and somebody could make my words pretty. So that's how we got it started. And then, of course, I've updated the book because technology changes, so it needed it. But had I waited until everything was done before I started marketing, then I would have missed some extraordinary opportunities. So that's something. I also did it as a keynote speaker. As a speaker, my very first opportunity, I was at a networking lunch and a woman says, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I speak." She goes, "Great. We're looking for speakers." It was Well Life at Work for their corporate wellness program. I'd introduced speakers. I'd never spoken to an audience as a presenter. So I put together a demo, which was so bad because I was basically reading PowerPoint slides, and they hired me. Well, they weren't looking for a keynote. They wanted somebody to facilitate programs, but that's what got me started in speaking. But it went back to, I knew how my brain worked. I hired an amazing speaking coach. I used visualization techniques, shifted my self-talk, competed in Toastmasters, made it 4 out of 6 levels in the international competition when I was still physically shaking when you put a microphone in my hand. But I tell people, it's not about, you don't have to write a book. You don't have to do these massive things, but it's pushing yourself every single day. Brush your teeth with the opposite hand. Don't put your mascara on with the opposite hand. That might go badly. But if you do leave, maybe you run to the store, you have these regular routes, drive a different route. Instead of getting out of the shower, maybe you put makeup on first, go get dressed first. Do little things every day that put you outside of your subconscious normal, because we're on subconscious autopilot, this 95% of the time. But start doing that consistently and then say yes to the opportunities. It doesn't have to be huge, but it's like today back, it's like, do the bundle. I'm here. Put yourself out there. What happens if you only get 20 new people on your email list, for goodness sake? Or what happens if it's 400, like it's happened to me in 2 weeks? So it's just keep doing the little things. Self-talk is huge. The other thing I am going to add in here, because I remember this every single day, Ursula Burns was the CEO of Xerox, multi-billion-dollar company. I heard her speak at an event in Kansas City, and she confessed to having imposter syndrome and wondering when they were going to come kick her out of the executive suite. The CEO, the CEO of Xerox. So when you're not listening to Leslie's guiding words via podcast or looking at her social posts or coaching with her to have her there to guide you, remember, if Ursula Burns thinks that she is going to get kicked out of her role, then we're good. We are so good. That was mind-blowing for me. Oh, by the way, the head of HR for Sprint said the same thing. I rode down the elevator with her. She's like, "Yeah, I think that every day." The head of HR for Sprint.
There's just, it's when you think about it, and it's so funny because I actually have been just noticing, I've been becoming more self-aware of how I'm watching these really incredible women that I am connected with who are successful. And I watch some of their social media and recognize that they are sharing the backstory a little bit more now. And the backstory isn't pretty. And so I know that we're not perfect. And I think a lot of people get online, especially, and I'm sure you've probably had conversations with your clients, that they see other people like killing it. And they think, well, how can I compete with that? And it's not about competing with other people. And it's not even really competing with yourself. It's really like, how can you up level yourself? But they get into their head. And so someone who can show you that they're really super, like you said, these C-level executives or people who are really incredibly successful. And you see now that they're posting about how I've had such a great week. I've had a fantastic time away with the family, and I feel lost. I'm exhausted. I feel irritated. I feel like I'm out of sorts. That just means we're human. And I think people forget that. So it's like when you go on social media, that's one of the things is don't compare yourself to other people. And don't think you have to be better than someone else. Be who you are. When you hear the word being authentic, it really just means use your journey, use your knowledge, your experience to do what you do. And don't worry about trying to be better than someone. Be different. Don't try to be the same, but be different. And being different means just being you. And I think that's how I've learned around what authentic really means. I think a lot of people think of the word authentic and it's such a buzzword for them that they're like, well, what does that even mean? But that's really that's what I think it means. It's just really being true to who you are and not trying to be the same as someone else. And like you were saying on social media, I'm like you. I pushed back on social media when it was like, oh, you have to post this amount of times. When people were saying to me, post in this many groups, go into people's DMs, do all of these things. And I was like, no, I'm pushing back because I know how it feels like to be on the other side of that. I don't like it. And if that doesn't make me feel good, I'm not going to do something to someone else or do something that doesn't feel aligned with me because you're saying that's how it's supposed to be. It has to be, it's really just about individually how you feel about it. So some people that might work, right? But for me, it doesn't. And like you said, for you, you weren't all about, oh, I have to be posting every day, a few times a day, everywhere, and being on my YouTube channel and posting videos every day or every week or however it works for you. Now you said you're growing your channel without even having new content because of just who you are. That's where I think people just have to look at. If that's your marketing, the services that you have. You're not putting yourself out there. You're putting your services out there and the transformation out there, making it about them and not about you. And I think that's powerful. So I love that.
Well,
really
and
do.
I'm glad. And I appreciate that very much. I used to post all the time. I used to do all that stuff. It was exhausting. And I will say there is a strategy, like Pinterest is a very specific platform with their own SEO, with their own strategy. You can't use what you do on Instagram. YouTube is the same way. You can't just throw up content and hope it's going to work. You have to use a very specific strategy. However, you don't have to burn yourself out doing it. So that's why I said go back to pick one platform, figure out where your clients are, do it well. But if you spend more time growing your email list, an asset that you own of people who are connected with you because they saw something in your message that spoke to them, that they said, I am willing to give you my email to become part of your world, then you have that opportunity to nurture the relationship, which is super important. Perfectly curated feeds will get you nowhere. I love what you said about being authentic. Some of my greatest, I remember one of my workshops, my mom had just fallen at a nursing home. I'm driving across the town to talk about stress management, and I show up and I'm crying. My eyes are red. And the group I spoke to connected with me more on that day than anything because some of them were going through the same stuff. And that's what your clients are looking for. There's other visibility coaches out there. Leslie, you're extraordinary at what you do. There's life coaches, there's wealth coaches, there's relationship coaches, there's a ton of us. But what makes us so unique, it's our personal experience combined with our expertise. And your story is so powerful. So put yourself out there, put your story out. People don't want polished and perfect. They connect with you. They don't care how many modules is in a program. They want you.
Yes. I love that. And I love how you reframed that about instead of putting yourself out there, you're putting your story out there because that story is going to resonate with someone. And that person, like you were saying, you went somewhere and you really connected with people. And I think that's what it's all about. Well, I've loved this conversation today. I had one more question. I know we're going a little bit over, but what I wanted to ask you is what's one final piece of advice that you would give to women or words of encouragement to women who are listening today who are navigating their personal and professional growth journeys, especially if they're feeling overwhelmed or uncertain about the next steps? How would you encourage them to keep moving and keep going after what they want?
One of the biggest ahas from the Pacific Institute that I went through was recognizing what my self-talk was, recognizing what I was saying in my own head, how it was holding me back, how it would sometimes make up stories about what I was capable of and what I wasn't capable of doing, and just becoming aware of that. So a couple of things that I will tell you to do is like write on your bathroom mirror, whether it's a word, a phrase, you can do it a marker, you can put it Post-it notes, do it on your computer, those little reminders that as you get into your day, you get busy and you forget. It's a reminder to come back. Could be as simple as breathe. I am doing this. I am getting better. By the way, I used to be 30 minutes late and now I had to shift to consistently early, but self-talk is big. And then Leslie, you mentioned about it at the beginning. It's having that person like Jennifer is my go-to where I'll text her and go, I need a loving kick in the ass right now because I can't get out of my own head. Sometimes you can figure it out on your own, and other times have that trusted person that you can go to that will literally, just like today, Beck, I love you. It's time to cut the shit. She wrote a book called Cut the Shit. So I'm like, I love you, but this is how you are, what you're saying, but have that other person who can look objectively. Because the saying about forest for the trees, we get so caught up, we get blinders on that we don't see that next opportunity or that next thing. So self-talk first, and then, have somebody else in your back corner when you need it.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you very much for spending time with me and sharing your expertise, your personal experiences. I really love the way you built your business, helped others grow theirs by amplifying their own online presence and fostering meaningful connections as being that cornerstone to success. And your contact information is in the show notes. So anyone who wants to connect with you, to learn more about your strategies, possibly working with you to help them build a stronger online presence, to grow their business, create lasting connections, teaching them how to do that. Do that well for them. I'm really excited for you to be a part of the podcast series. It has been such a pleasure hearing about your journey, and I'm so glad you're able to share it with us today. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate being here. And if you haven't talked to Leslie, your energy is off the charts, by the way. I noticed that when we did the first call. It's just amazing. So I'm excited that we connected, and I look forward to seeing what the future holds.
Thank you so much. To our listeners today, I hope that the conversation has given you some great insights and ideas to think about in your journey, especially as you kick off the new year. Remember, personal growth is about taking those steps, no matter how small, towards the life you really want to create. If Joyce's story has sparked something in you, don't hesitate to reach out to her directly through the links in the show notes. I encourage you to explore how her strategies could help you move your business forward. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep designing your extraordinary life one day at a time. Thank you for joining me on Her Extraordinary Life by Design. I hope you've been inspired and empowered by the incredible stories shared on this show. If you enjoyed this episode and the conversations we've had, I would greatly appreciate if you could take a moment to leave a review. Your feedback and support mean the world to me, and it will help others discover the podcast and join our empowering community. Remember to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Together, we can continue to learn from these amazing women, uncover their extraordinary journeys, and be motivated to create our own lives by design. Thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, stay empowered and keep shaping your extraordinary life one day at a time.
Everyone has heard about the U.S. space program, but what is actually going on at NASA? Get the real story in 4 minutes or less with the NASA Daily podcast from Electricast. Join astronauts and researchers as they conduct groundbreaking experiments, work on the International Space Station, and reach for the stars. NASA Daily, your cosmic update.
Electricast.
Hi, I'm Geraldine Glass, and I'm excited to share a new healing music offering, an extended version song called Joy Reboot, a unique fusion of pop, classic, rap, soundscapes, and funk to inspire collaboration and bring unity through sound. For us, Joy Reboot is music medicine, out now with Electricast Records.
Electricast.